Hey everyone, it is Carol Williams with Williams Immigration, and we are live this Monday evening, although it's a long weekend, so it kind of feels like still Saturday or Sunday. But I wanted to go live. I've been getting lots and lots of questions about folks that are in student status that are then going to be transitioning, hopefully, into H-1B status and what that looks like. And then if they can then become green card holders and get their green cards and their lawful permanent residence. So I wanted to just go live and really talk about that. So we are live on the Facebook page. We are live in the private Facebook group. If you are not a member of that group, you are certainly welcome to join. We are also live on TikTok. Hello, TikTok. And we are also live on the YouTube channel. So we're live in quite a few places. So the thing I really wanted to start with is for our international students. If you're here in the United States in F1 status, or you are considering becoming an international student here in the US, I think this is super helpful for you as well. The international student is typically going to be here in the US on an F1 status. And then once they graduate, they are given what's called, or they apply because they are eligible for what's called optional practical training. So, sorry, y'all, I'm getting over a cold. So with optional practical training, they are allowed 1 year of work authorization. If it's a STEM field, science, technology, engineering, and math, then they're allowed another 2 years of work authorization. That's all connected to their student status. So that's great. However, you want to think about very, very quickly, once you secure your postgraduate position, is getting yourself into the H-1B lottery. So I always tell my clients, you want to apply for that early lottery, that H-1B lottery, as early and as often as you possibly can. So if you graduate in May, June timeframe, or if you graduate in December, those are kind of the two big timeframes in the US where folks are graduating from colleges, from universities. If you graduate in the May-June timeframe, you get your OPT, you start working. Don't forget that you really want to get yourself into the lottery. The lottery opens up in March of every year. So it's crucial, especially if you only have 1 year of OPT available. You want to make sure that you are in that lottery, so that you have an opportunity to be chosen in the lottery. Okay. If you graduate in the December timeframe, you want to make sure that you again get into the lottery the very next March, so that you have that opportunity to get into the H-1B lottery. If it winds out that you are selected in the lottery, that is great. Then you want to file your H-1B petition. We get you an H-1B petition. We get you an H-1B status. But remember, you are then, once your H-1B is approved, your official start date in H-1B cannot be before October 1. That is the government's fiscal year. That's the beginning of the government's fiscal year. So that is super important to understand. But if you are in F1 student status, we have what's called cap gap. So if you file your H-1B application because you were chosen in the lottery before you expire, before your student status expires, then you're automatically allowed to continue in F1 student status in your OPT and continue working. So just keep that in mind, right? So next thing I want to talk to you all about is if you get the H-1B status, then you're in your position, everything is going great, and you decide that you really like this employer, you want to stay with this employer, your employer really loves you, you want to stay. What's next? So for a lot of people, what's next is a green card application. So typically, if you're in H-1B status, Typically, your green card application is going to be what's called an EB3, a third employment-based category. So there's 3 different parts to that process. I want to just kind of tell you quickly what they are. And again, if you guys have any questions, you can feel free to pop those in the comments, and I will take a look at them. We've got a few questions coming in, so I'll get to those in a little bit. So the EB3 category is its third employment-based category. You need to have a bachelor's degree, and super, super important, I tell this to people all the time, and the position has to require at least a bachelor's degree. If it requires less than a bachelor's degree, that's fine. We can still get EB3. It'll just depend on how much experience or how much education up to that bachelor's degree is required, right? But typically the job's going to require at least a bachelor's degree. And we already know that, especially if you're coming through an H-1B status, because the H-1B requires that the position require at least a bachelor's degree, okay? So that's going to put you firmly into the EB3 category. The first thing that we need to do with EB3 category for that green card application is go through the Department of Labor. We get what we call a prevailing wage from the Department of Labor. Then we advertise for the position according to the Department of Labor requirements. And then we certify with the Department of Labor that the employer hasn't been able to find anybody that meets these requirements. And then we file with the Department of Labor. Once Department of Labor comes back to us and says, great, we totally agree with you. We think you did your advertising correctly. And we believe, based on what you've told us, that you haven't found anybody, that the employer hasn't found anybody, then we are able to move forward. Once the Department of Labor approves us, then we start having conversations with USCIS, or the Immigration Service here in the States. The first application that we file with them essentially says that the employer has found an employee that they would like to hire, and also that they have already gone through the Department of Labor process. They've already gone through that labor certification process. That second application tells the Immigration Service that the individual meets the minimum requirements based on their employment and education history, and that the employer is able to pay the wage, that they are financially stable enough to pay the wage, okay? Once that application gets approved, and that application can be filed using premium processing, so that can speed up the process a little bit. Once that application gets approved, then we may have to wait, right? So we may have to wait before we can file that third application. That third application is going to be your adjustment of status. That is the last thing standing between you and your green card. The visa bulletin tells us where your place is in line to get your green card. Department of State tells us about the visa bulletin every single month. Every single month I look for my clients, when can we file this last green card? And we have to wait sometimes because there's only a certain number of green cards that are allowed to be issued every single fiscal year, guys. It's not that I want to hold up an application. It is not that the Immigration Service can't process things. Legally, they are only allowed to issue a certain number of green cards every single year. So it's an incredibly complicated numbers process and how they figure this out. But every month they tell us when we can file the adjustment of status application. So when we can file your adjustment is based on when we filed your perm application, when we filed that labor certification application. So assuming that we can then just move right on forward and file your adjustment application, we get that filed. Sometimes we have to wait. Sometimes we have to wait a couple months. Sometimes we have to wait a couple of years. I'm not going to lie to y'all. Sometimes that visa bulletin is unforgiving. And it depends on where you're from in the world. Right now, individuals that are Indian nationals have a crazy long wait time. So just keep that in mind, right? So sometimes we have to wait before we can get that last application, that adjustment of status filed. But when we can get it filed, hopefully we can get it through the Immigration Service fairly quickly. It just depends on what their processing times are. But at the end of that, you then come out with a green card. So the questions that I've been getting recently are, can I include my spouse and my children on this application? The answer is yes. You can include your spouse. You can include your children. Your children must be under 21 years old and unmarried. That is the definition of a child in the U.S. immigration world. A lot of people think that person, to be a child, to qualify, they need to be 18 and under. That is not the case. They need to be 21 or under 21 and unmarried. So just keep that in mind. There are times, because this process sometimes takes so long, there are circumstances by which you can extend your H-1B past the 6-year limit. There are times where when we apply for your adjustment of status, my office always applies for independent work authorization and travel permission as well. Depending on what your case looks like, depending on the strategy that we've got going on for your case. So really just wanted to cover those today. I get a ton of questions about those. I've gotten a lot of questions about that H-1B to green card switch, especially since there is a second lottery run with the H-1Bs. But I really want you guys to take away from today that you've got to be on top of getting yourselves into the lottery. If you are an employer, it is crucial that you get your employees that are currently in F1 OPT student status, that you get them entered into the lottery as early and as often as you can. And by often, I don't mean that for one lottery, you enter them 18,000 times. That is against the rules and will get you kicked out of the lottery. By often, I mean if your employee is on a STEM OPT, they can apply for the lottery their first year and then their second 2 years of STEM OPT. So make sure that you are taking advantage of this. Don't say, oh, I'm going to take a wait and see approach and I'm just going to apply to get them into the lottery, on their first extension for STEM, because you've already missed out on an opportunity. Okay, so you just want to make sure that you are really getting your folks into the lottery. And so let me see, is it uncommon to have a green card interview scheduled within 3 months without any RFE? Is it uncommon to have a green card interview scheduled within 3 months without an RFE? Can you get an interview scheduled within 3 months? Absolutely. Listen, if you don't get an RFE, that's a great thing. So AD, yeah, if you don't have don't sort of wish yourself into having an RFE. Nobody wants an RFE. So if you can get your green card issued and get to your interview without an RFE, that's fantastic. I definitely work with clients and we sometimes don't get an RFE. That's great. Like, I would never talk an RFE into the atmosphere. So if you have gotten your interview scheduled and you haven't gotten an RFE, that's great. Go to your interview. Godspeed. Good luck. I hope everything works out for you. But yeah, my clients definitely will sometimes not get an RFE, but an RFE is not the end of the world. So if you get an RFE and you have filed on your own and you're not quite sure how to deal with an RFE, you definitely want to make sure that you have a conversation or start working with a lawyer. I look at the RFE as kind of a gift sometimes. The RFE is a request for further evidence on a file. It is when the Immigration Service has more questions for you. And so as long as the Immigration Service is continuing to ask you questions, that's a good thing. It's when they stop asking you questions and they just send you a notice of intent to deny, or they send you a denial notice. So an RFE, I look at an RFE as a gift. I tell my clients, don't freak out about them. We will respond to them. And it is one more opportunity for us to make our case to the Immigration Service. It said you filed in June, got an interview scheduled. that's great. You will get your day in front of an immigration officer quicker than some others. So, I don't think that's a bad thing. So good luck on your interview. Um, so again, I tend to look at the RFE really as just another opportunity to continue the conversation with the Immigration Service. You can also get, instead of an RFE, the Immigration Service will sometimes they'll skip the RFE and they'll go directly to a notice of intent to deny. The notice of intent to deny is certainly a serious notice. It means that the Immigration Service is ready and wants to deny your application, but they are going to give you one last opportunity to give them more information. So I strongly suggest, if you receive a notice of intent to deny, that you start working with a professional, start working with an immigration attorney who has experience in the type of case that you have filed. That is very important. So not all immigration attorneys do all types of immigration cases. So it's very important that you ask that attorney that you are calling or that you're reaching out to if this is a case that they can help you with. So that is something you want to keep in mind. Let me scroll up because I think I may have missed a question or two. Let's see here. Okay, I think I got all the questions. I think I got all the comments or questions. But if I missed it, feel free to put it back on the comments. Let me check the comments over here. All right, I don't see any over here. All right. The other thing I want to talk about today, super fast, depending on how many questions you have, is what happens if your employer is not doing green card applications right now. We know that some employers have put a hold on all green card applications because they've had some reduction in force, they've had some layoffs, they've had to let people go. And frankly, Department of Labor has some really strict rules around that. You cannot apply for that labor certification application for someone if you have recently laid off workers in that very same job classification. The Department of Labor's job in this process is to protect the U.S. worker. So some people have reached out to me and they have said that their employer has put on hold indefinitely green card processing. And so what are their options? So for those folks, we have looked at an EB1, an extraordinary ability green card option. We have also looked at an EB2, national interest waiver option. Those are two green card options that you do not need an employer to sponsor for you. So if you think you may qualify for those or you want to know more about those, you're certainly welcome to schedule a consultation with the office. During that consultation, we'll go through your resume. We'll go through any sort of we'll go through your resume, we'll go through your employment background, we'll go through your educational background. If you have any publications, I want to know about those. If you've spoken on international panels or if you've spoken at conferences, anything that puts you out in front of your colleagues, I want to know about it. And anything that your colleagues have said about you in the press, online, anything like that. And so I always tell people EB1 and EB2, extraordinary ability and national interest waiver, respectively, are not limited to folks in the STEM fields. If you are in business, if you are in arts, you can certainly qualify for extraordinary ability and you can certainly qualify for national interest waiver. So don't forget that. Don't think that these are just for don't think that these are only for STEM fields. They are not. let's see, I filed a J1 waiver. Can I also file for an adjustment of status based on marriage to a USC, or do I have to wait? You have to wait. So a J1 waiver, when you come in on a J1 and you are required to go home at the end of your time in J1, it's what we call, there's a 2-year requirement that you go home. If you have that 2-year requirement, there is very little that you can do to adjust your status or to get a green card until you have either gone home and satisfied that 2-year waiver, that 2-year time frame at home, or you have received a waiver of that 2-year time frame that you're required to go home. So that 2-year waiver, that J1 waiver, must be approved before you can adjust your status. So just make sure that you are following all the requirements on that, and make sure that you're doing your J1 waiver properly. And then I hope you are able to get that approved. Yeah. So J1 waivers can be a little bit tricky. Yeah, if you've just filed, it's probably not going to have, I don't know what just means. I don't know, exactly when you filed, but yeah, J1 waivers sometimes can take a little bit. Excuse me, especially if you are, asking for your home country to waive any issues that they may have. So you definitely want to make sure that your J1 waiver is in place before you try to change your status or apply for your green card, because they will be denied if your J1 waiver is not approved. So you want to make sure that you go through that process very, very methodically. The other thing I wanted to talk to you all about, or remind you all about, is one that your national interest waiver, which is EB2, or your extraordinary ability, which is EB1, does not require you to have an employer to sponsor you. You can do that on your own. And on your own, I mean, you simply just don't need an employer to do that. But you want to make sure that that application is well done, well crafted, and that you are really explaining who you are, what you do, and how you meet those criteria. The other thing I wanted to talk about is not particularly employment related, although I'm happy to field more questions about the employment side of the immigration house. Applying for your family. If you are a U.S. citizen, you can apply for your immediate family to get them green cards. So you can apply for your spouse, you can apply for your fiance, you can apply for your minor children. Remember, minor children are under 21 and unmarried. And you can also apply for your parents. So those green card applications can be done if your family members are in the U.S. or if they are not in the U.S. If they are not in the U.S., then they are going to have to, the end of your process, you'll have to deal with the overseas consulate, and they'll have their interview there. If not, if they're in the U.S., they'll have their interview in the U.S. I've had several questions last week about types of evidence that you need. What if you don't have everything? Folks have Googled, they found these ideal lists on the internet of what makes a perfect application. And you can certainly find lists on the internet. I give my clients a list of documents that I would like to see. What I tell them about that list is it is my absolute 100% preferred list of documents. I would love for someone to be able to give me every single document on the list that I give them. I have yet, in all of my years of practice, to have anyone give me all the documents on the list. And the reason I say this to you, and the reason I say this to my clients, is that you don't have to provide everything on what is considered to be the ideal list, right? Everybody's relationship looks different. There's certainly there are some things that we cannot move forward without, right? If you are petitioning for your parent, I'm gonna need a birth certificate, y'all. Like, I'm gonna need something that links you to your parent, okay? If you're petitioning for your spouse, right, I'm gonna need a marriage certificate. It's difficult to move forward without that, right? But joint bank accounts are wonderful. Only if you're using them, right? But if you just get a joint bank account because you saw that there's a list online that says USCIS really likes a joint bank account, but you're not using that joint bank account, well, that's not helpful, right? So I always tell my clients, live your life however you're going to live your life. My job as your attorney is to help the Immigration Service understand how you are living your life and help them feel comfortable in your application to check all the boxes that they need to check in order to get to the approval. That's my job. That's what I do for my clients. I ask them a whole lot of questions about how they're living their lives. Let's say if they don't have joint bank accounts. Let's say if there's a huge age difference. Let's say if there's a religion difference. Let's say if there's a language difference, right? The Immigration Service is going to pick up on these things, and they're going to want to know, well, how is this a real relationship? How is this a real marriage? Are you just in it for the green card? Are you just doing this for the green card, right? And so my job is to really figure out how you're living your life, because I'm going to ask you, you're going to explain it to me, and then I'm going to explain it to the Immigration Service, right? And then that helps me craft a list of documents that are specific to you and your particular situation, because no two situations are the same. So I've gotten several questions last week about, the ideal document list. And I think every single immigration attorney out there has a slightly different ideal list, right? What is important is that documents are submitted that make sense and that explain your individual situation, your individual lifestyle, how you are living, what you are doing. Excuse me, y'all. Oh, I'm getting over this cold. It is a pain. Let's see. I think I missed something a little bit earlier. How long is N400 taking these days? To be precise, Georgia State. I actually don't have a naturalization application pending in Georgia at the moment. So that is, I don't know. This is the short answer to your question. I don't know all the different processing times. My firm certainly works with the N400, and we help people with their naturalization application. I don't know what the current processing time is. But y'all, maybe you don't know, so I'm going to tell you. This is why I love doing these lives. You can actually look on the USCIS website and determine the current processing times. If you go to uscis.gov and then you search for processing times, it will bring you straight to their processing times page. But I think it is, if you scroll down on the homepage, it'll get you to, there's a box sort of midway down the page that'll get you to the processing times. So the short answer is I don't know how long it is taking off the top of my head for Georgia. If this is something that you haven't filed and you're looking for help, you are certainly welcome to call in. We can do a consultation with you. And then at that point, I always look at processing times when I do consultations with folks so that they have sort of a really rounded out idea of not only what the process is, what the strategy is, but also how long they can expect it to take. Let me see here. Scroll up a little bit, scroll down, make sure I didn't forget anything. But yeah, congratulations if you've already filed your N400. That is exciting. It's an exciting time. I have a couple of clients that are going in for their swearing in ceremonies for citizenship, so I'm excited for them. Let's see here. I don't see any more questions. But if you have any, you're certainly welcome to ask them. Let me check over here. And I will stay on for a few more minutes if you guys have any more questions. I will be back again live tomorrow at 5:30. Before I say that, let me check my calendar real quick, but I'm pretty sure we got tomorrow at 5:30 in here. Yes, I'll be back tomorrow again at 5:30. with some consistency for y'all. All right, I'm not seeing any more questions, but I will be back tomorrow and we can talk about more employment-based U.S. immigration and family-based U.S. immigration. This has been fun. Come back with your questions, comments, concerns about the whole system. That's totally fine. I hope you guys had a wonderful Labor Day weekend, and I will chat with y'all tomorrow. Talk to you soon. Bye.